Hello everyone, welcome to BunkaMania Wrestling. I am Jeremy Graves, joined by Tom Linberry. We are back in the cast studio. If you're watching on the YouTube version, that will make complete sense to you. But if you're listening in the audio-only realm, no matter what podcast provider you have found us on, thank you very much for checking out the show. We hope you enjoy it, and if you do, why not tell a friend? If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you can get lots of videos throughout the week relating to WWE and AEW. Today, we are focusing on AEW Double or Nothing. More specifically, what's going to be the main event? Because the logical assumption would be the world title match. Because we have the four-way pillars match with Sammy Guevara, MJF defending, Darby Allin, and Jungle Boy. But we now have the Anarchy in the Arena match with the Blackpool Combat Club and the Elite. The reason I wanted to mention this is because it could be very fairly argued Anarchy in the Arena, given how great the last one was, perhaps should be the main event, because imagine if that closed the entire show. And to a degree, the build-up for this four-way match for the pay-per-view hasn't exactly been brilliant. There have been some stumbling blocks. We've spoken in private about this. You mentioned it to me earlier today, actually, before we recorded, that you just don't see MJF losing the match. So, in terms of what should be the main event, I guess the first question, Tom, is there actually a discussion to be had in this, in your opinion?
I think if you have Anarchy in the arena on last, like, it saves a lot of waiting around while they kind of tidy up after it for then to set up the main event. But at the same time, MJF is the world champion. Mm-hmm. He is the most despised heel in the company, even without trying, by the sounds of it. I mean, the guy he does a really good job. Mm-hmm. So I can kind of see both sides of the coin. I could see the four-way being on last. But, I mean, is it a strong enough main event? Or, I think the Elite, goes back to the Elite and BCC thing has been more well put together and built and has taken longer to get here than the four-way, which I feel is going to be a good match. But I don't think it's the main event for people. I might be wrong, and again, just my opinion, but that's where I stand with that. So I think, Anarchy in the Arena should be on last.
Yeah, and I would agree with that too. And I know there'll be a lot of people out there that may say the world title should always go on last. I disagree, only in that sometimes you've just got to read the room. And if there is a match that is clearly far bigger than anything else on the show, you should change the order. I guess as I'm trying to think of a random example where that might have been the case in the context of AEW. I mean, heck, I'll put it this way. The first Dynamite Grand Slam at the Arthur Ashe Stadium, the opening match on it was Danielson and Omega. And I think that was a great decision because it ultimately went to a 30-minute draw, but the idea that they're just going to let it go for as long as it goes.
I think that made sense on that show as well, because if they'd have started that half an hour before the show ended, you could have kind of figured that was what was going to happen.
Exactly.
Whereas that, putting it on first makes a lot more sense. But at the same time, you're not going to put a four-way on first. It's probably going to be Jericho and Cole, let's be fair.
The unsanctioned match, you reckon?
Well, I've got a theory on this, but go on.
Okay. It's a really things that you could have either or match, but I think in terms of what the people are going to be most into, it's going to be Anarchy in the Arena. And it will be a spectacle in of itself.
I think if you need to keep people in the building, that's probably what's going to keep them in the building.
Yeah, which...
That is in Vegas, so...
True, but then that being said, though, and this is kind of my defence now in favour for the four-way being last, aside from the fact it's the world title match, because that's a point, I get it, traditional and whatnot. But I said on past podcasts before with Ian that when it came to this main event at Revolution, when it was the Iron Man match, Danielson MJF, my mindset going in was, okay, I want to watch it, but it's 60 minutes. Whereas in hindsight, because of how much I enjoyed it, and I appreciate you were in the building, so you had a different experience of this.
Wow.
Well, I'll tell you, we'll come to that. Let me finish this point. So But in hindsight, I wish I'd have just been in the moment more, not thinking, how far have we got through this? Are we near the end? I wish I'd have just taken it for what it was, because I freaking loved the match. I really, really enjoyed it. And by the time we got to the end, it was such a great emotional ride. I kind of, in hindsight, wish I'd have just trusted AEW, like I do most of the time anyway, when it comes to how they put on stuff, and just take it for what it is and what is put in front of me. So in that sense, I imagine this 4-way match could be ridiculously good fun.
Definitely, especially with the people that are in it.
Exactly. So there are going to be some insane moments. I'm sure Darby will do something ridiculous. Sammy will probably try and muller himself as usual. Jungle Boy will probably look like $1,000,000 as well, and Max will probably be like a chicken heel, as it were, at times, and then do some odd big moves to try and steal a win. There's a lot of different dynamics involved for this match to be really good fun. That said, I think you could totally justify it only being 10, maybe 15 minutes max. Just have it basically be a sprint.
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of talent in that match. I can see the argument, as I said, for both sides, but there is a lot of talent in that match.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to remember, at least 3 of them are going to be there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So that they do well to establish themselves as main event players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it needs sort of to go 2025. I mean, I think we all know the outcome.
Let's call
At the same time, you never know.
Exactly. Things may change in the coming days before we do our full-blown prediction show on the pay-per-view, but let's just call it like it is. One assumes at this time MJF's retaining. One just assumes that because there's a very clear direction they want to go with long-term for MJF. They've not mentioned it in recent weeks and months, finally, but, you know, this whole bidding war of 2024 malark, and that he may just...
That does make you wonder, though.
Exactly. There's always a little element of that, and obviously now that All In has been announced, what involvement will MJF have on the show and stuff?
No, I meant, do you think that he's staying?
Oh, yeah, true. I clearly didn't allude to that properly like I was planning to, but yes, you're right. Is he ultimately going to stay? So there are a lot of variables, but you were talking about the talent in the match. There's also a load of talent in the Anarchy in the Arena match.
No, I see your point. No, I get that. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I don't know. I think if you to end the show with Anarchy in the Arena, you kind of end with a certain level of everyone goes home happy regardless of who wins the match. Whereas if MJF does win, there'll be people booing and people will be upset. Unless it, of course, leads to something else going forward. So MJF wins the match and then someone turns up or we get something announced or, you know, I mean, what I would really like, and I haven't again discussed this with you beforehand, would see Minoru Suzuki come out and beat up MJF.
I freaking
But
love
again, that's probably not going to happen.
If that's going to happen, that may be a Forbidden Door thing, which in itself would be hilarious. I think that would be great fun, just MJF having to survive Minoru Suzuki. That I would more than happily pay to see.
And I would assume he would have to cheat to win. But at the same time, it would make sense to me to have that kind of level of match for MJF, because then it's a learning match. But at the same time, it may up his game. Not that MJF is a bad wrestler, but you know, it's a learning match.
A learning curve, a learning experience.
Learning curve, yeah, match, whatever you want to use.
So ultimately, what is going to main event the pay-per-view? We're obviously not going to know until we get to the day of itself, but I think there is a very fair argument for either of these two matches to be the main event.
Of course, we could both be very, very wrong, and they could end it with Adam Cole and Chris Jericho, because this is an unsanctioned match, and most of the unsanctioned matches in AEW have been at the end of the show.
Like, I think we mentioned actually in our Dynamite review, the Moxley Omega match from the pay-per-view. Was it Full Gear? I think it was when they had that match.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that I believe was the final match on the show. So, like you just alluded to. So, it's not out of the ordinary.
There's several avenues that could be explored to be the main event.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it would make more sense to end with Anarchy in the Arena. But again, that's just my opinion. And I
Agreed.
think yours, to be fair.
Exactly, completely agree. So that being said, folks, what do you think should be the main event match of Double or Nothing this coming weekend? Have we convinced you that one or the other should be? Are we both wrong in your opinion? Let us know in the comments, be it on YouTube or if you want to find BunkaMania on Twitter, we are at BunkaMania UK. Again, if you've been joining us in the audio-only realm, thank you very much for listening. And if you're here on YouTube, thank you very much for watching. But before we go, Tom, you have a final thought.
I just had a thought while we've been sitting here talking about this, and it makes a lot of sense for Anarchy in the Arena to go on last.
Okay, go on.
Because
Your final sales pitch for this. Come on, look what we got.
I'm going to sell you the pay-per-view. Or at least the last 10 minutes. We haven't seen Konosuke Takeshita in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I assume Don Callis will be involved in some way or form.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and it would make a lot of sense, and again, just my opinion, that if Konosuke Takeshita to join the Blackpool Combat Club, because that would make a lot of sense for his development and his character going forward.
Yeah.
Which then would lead to the Elite needing another man. Now, they can't use the person they would have probably used 6 years ago. We won't get into that. But Kota Ibushi wants to work for AEW, and that would make a lot of sense for him to turn up at the end of the pay-per-view and reform a team with Kenny Omega, and ultimately, I would assume, join the Elite going forward.
Essentially that golden elite which they had for a little while.
So if I'm right, everyone owes me a pint. I don't drink, but Pepsi is welcome. Other drinks are available.
Yeah, and you know what? We mentioned the Takeshita element of it last week in the Dynamite review that we recorded as well.
We did, yes.
So we have brought that up on the table, and that I really want to see this happen. If this doesn't happen, I'm blaming you.
That's fine. Everyone blames you for anything anyway.
Folks, again, let us know what you think in the comments. But either way, thank you very much for listening and or watching. From us here at BunkaMania UK, we'll be back with more Double or Nothing previews and ultimately a big review of it with ourselves as well. Thank you for listening and watching. Take care.